Hi everybody, I'm gonna get started. I think it's time to get started, right? 2:35? Okay. I'm Nicole Hall. I'm going to be doing the presentation on presentation. So just some basic tips and tricks about, getting your presentations up to, a really nice level without like going over the top and without rendering something for 10 hours. And, it's supposed to be everyday, simple tricks. This presentation is a thought starter, get your mind going on some of the things you can do. You don't have to adopt everything in this presentation. And I know some companies sometimes have their standards, but sometimes enhancing those standards and bringing something back to the team that might be of value is good. So you don't have to take everything here and say we need to change everything. But this is just a nice, good, basic how to get that next level presentation. So a little bit about presentation on presentation. A little bit about me. I work for Waldners, located in Manhattan in New York. I've been in this crazy dealer designer world for about 5 years, and it's been super fun, and I love it. One of my main interests is, graphic design, marketing, logo branding. So I take a lot of that inspiration from even just like magazines that you're, reading every day, and cookbooks and stuff like that, where, they really thought about the layout of everything. And, sometimes it's even good to utilize that information to mimic in your own presentations. Save something that's your favorite. Oh, this was just shown very nicely, and you can kind of even just move your renderings a certain way and keep something offset a little bit. Like you don't have to do something so linear all the time. So I always try and find inspiration in that. This presentation is really supposed to be dialed down to like a typical and just getting that to the next level. I'm not going to do a whole project. But it's simple things that you can save as favorites and reutilize every day. So maybe you have to spend a little time now to do it, but you'll have it. So you'll be done with it for the next time. So all things being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best one. My marketing partner, Terry, actually came with me with this solution. This is what she goes about in her daily life in the marketing world. And I'm like, this is really great, because this is something that we can attest to all the time, is that there's going to be 1,001 ways to do something with endless possibilities, and you can do it this way or that way. And sometimes you really just got to think about it and like, what am I really trying to do here? And it's usually that simple solution that tends to be the best one. And you just got to narrow yourself down to it, because we, as designers, we can do 1,000 different things, 1,000 different ways. And sometimes being super simple is okay and the best way. You also, like, my main thing that you're going to get through this whole presentation is less is more. So you don't want to inundate a presentation with way too much information that your client's going to get lost in something. This whole presentation is really based on the client and the client needs, because they don't typically deal with the design language all the time. So if you can keep it as simple as possible, they'll be able to understand it better. And if they understand it better, less questions, and you can move forward in the design process a lot easier and quicker, and everybody understands everything. Let's see. Oh, did I skip something? Oh no, I did about me. Also, let's see. Okay, presentation 101, the basics. I'm going to go through some of just like the key little things to keep in mind when doing presentations. You want to use a readable font that's going to be legible for everybody. You don't want to choose something super funky and crazy that's going to be really hard to read. The content of your presentation, what are you really showing in it? Whether it's renderings, 2Ds, elevations, what is it that the client's going to understand, and keeping it as simple as possible. And scale and proportion, you don't want to have a 2D image that is super small and then your rendering super large. You're going to miss out on the scale of that layout, and that client's not going to understand the information in the 2D. So if you kind of like scale everything to be appropriately sized, it's going to be so much more readable, and everybody's going to understand the content of that presentation. Let's see. So readable fonts. I have a couple of different, ideas of using sans serif fonts, which you can Google and you can get a whole list of the ones that are under that that title. But I have showed, they're all clean, they're very simple, readable. There's nothing too crazy that's going on with them, but if you're going to use a font, you're going to want to use the same font throughout the whole presentation. You're not going to want to switch it up. The only maybe appropriate one is the Calibri and the Calibri Light, because those are just renditions of themselves. For the fonts to stay clear of, you can see on the other side the serif fonts. They're more stylized and condensed, and they play around with the spacing of the fonts too much, and it can get very distracting to a client, and they're not going to be able to pick up key points, and if you put too much text, they're not going to read it all anyway. So if you can keep it simple with a good font, they'll be more likely to delve down into that information. Let's see. Content of presentation. I have my notes. I am trying to stay on track because I am pregnant. I don't know if you saw it in my About Me slide, so I'm trying to, I forget things too much nowadays. So content of presentation. So you want to stay with the 5 W's that everybody knows, the who, what, where, when, why. Who is your audience to your presentation? Is it a client or is it an A&D firm? They'll be able to understand something very different than what a client understands. Is it something internal just for, your design team? Then, you can keep stuff on it. Meaning tagging and all that fun stuff that, a lot of the times for clients, they don't need to see every tag that you have, all the junction pieces and electrical power kits and all that crazy stuff. They're like, what's a PK or what's an I-66? They're not going to understand that, so don't put them in your presentations. The what do you want to portray to a client? What is a client really going to understand? Are they going to understand an elevation? Or is rendering something a lot better and easier for them to, take with them? Where you want to be able to figure out where you want to lay certain things out. Are you going to lay out 10 renderings in one page, or you're going to start breaking them off and scaling them the right way so it's clear for your client to understand and they can really see all the content within that. When is it appropriate to do everything? You have to gauge your client. If your client's very nitpicky, you're going to want to put as much information as you can. If they're just going to look at a pretty picture and be like, yes, I want that, I want this, and stuff like that, then you really you need to understand what who your client is and what they really want and what they're going to get out of it. They want everything simple and fast and done. So keeping it clean and simple, which I'm going to say a lot, and why. You want to make the presentation as clean as possible, so everything is precise and you can move on with the next step of the project. I have some examples that I want to show that, just have a couple of different things that, really can help a client out. For this layout, we have the component plan and electrical plan laid out so they can see where they're getting everything. And then we have the elevations down below that actually kind of align with that typical, so it's clear and easy to see. So if you slide your mouse down, everything's really hitting the correct points on this elevation. So it's not confusing. You can also include labels and tags. Of course, the elevation tag would help here, but it was more of a clean, clear presentation. They had selected everything already, so it's just to show what's there. And for the electrical, same thing. If you slide your mouse down, it's going to hit, oh, okay, now I understand where this is really located. I see that there's electrical here, and it's at the belt position, and that's fine. Secondly, I want to show a quick typical of this, a rendering of this typical, which is good because now they can really see what they're getting. And nothing is hidden except what's behind this panel, which I then took away and showed everything inside, and I labeled everything. Sometimes it's good to keep things clean. Okay, this is a nice rendering. I kind of see what my typical is, and then show them all this information, which is fun. I think it's a little intuitive to the client, and that was just a fun feature to kind of see what's going on in this typical, label everything, add finish notes if you need, slat wall notes. I have accessories in here. But sometimes if your accessories, aren't included in your pricing, you may just want to disclaimer yourself and say, accessories not included in final pricing. You never want them to wonder if they're getting something or not. So always make the client aware that, that what's included is included and what's not, it's not. And then I did it again for a larger typical, same type of thing. I kept everything streamlined and similar, so I'm not going to do another typical and then not show the same type of information. I broke it apart, and now they can see within the workstation and what's really going on in here. And then I just have a couple areas where I had broken out some of the important custom millwork type of products, which you can decide upon with everything that you're specifying. I know sometimes with ancillary, it can get a little crazy with trying to show every vignette that you do on a whole, 300 station plan. But sometimes it's really beneficial to get that information out there, have the client sign off on it, and move on.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
With the live slide, are all of your notes and everything, with all the arrows and whatnot, is that all done on CET?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's done on CET in Paperspace. I can show you. I'm going to do, after this portion, I'm going to go into CET and kind of show tips and tricks on some of the stuff that is in the presentation, so I'll definitely show that. Yes, this whole slide was done in CET. But with these arrows, they're clean, they're linear, and nothing's shooting across the whole rendering, so it's not really blocking anything, and they're not getting lost or too lost with all of this extra stuff kind of showing on their rendering, which is good to have this one because it's clean. Example 2, this is more of an installation type of scenario for this client. It's more of our annuity client that kind of gets the same deliverables every single time. So we do show all the tags and everything because we want them to sign off on the full package. But I'm not going to go into too much of installation drawings, but there are a couple things in here I would like to highlight. Breakpoints. They're very important in doing layouts. I have this line that's running across here. It's kind of just helping the client look from vignette to vignette and then come down a level to see the renderings. It breaks it off, and then they can move their eyes a little easier throughout the presentation. Even at the, down here at the labels and who the client is, I have break lines from, it's a workstation typical as we all see, but the location of where this is and the date and the client and even their logo. It's just a nice personalized touch to the presentation. This is more of, this kind of layout is more like for bids or like conceptual type of layouts. So I still used it for this client to make it just very nice, but I still have, your company's disclaimer note that sometimes, you need to have on your drawings. Just make sure that you include all that information if you need. I don't want, anything to, them to see something, not have a disclaimer on your drawing for anything, and then just run with it. So if you need certain things on there, I understand, which I kept our note from our dealership. So I have typicals, private office. I have, even here, I have the finished details of it. I have, the huddle rooms and the focus rooms, and then where they're located on the floor plan, which is nice for install because now the installers, if you've subsectioned it the right way, with the huddle room, they can be able to find it very easily on the floor. And then what's my favorite part of this presentation, after this part, this is just showing storage areas and the elevations of what they're getting in each area. Sometimes your blocks just look like squares to them and they don't really know like, oh, that's, a 5-high lateral or that's a wardrobe. So it's nice to show an elevation of exactly what they're getting in that space. And then phasing. This portion has come up a lot in just the conference in general with asking for the opacity to happen in paper space, which is not a thing yet. I know there in the last session a couple people had some workarounds. I have a workaround which I will show, which I'll show towards the end. Sorry, I'm not supposed to touch the microphone. So I like to keep everything very simple and easy, and I like to keep the opacity clean. I know in CET you can kind of do the same thing, but you see the blocks in front of the shade, the shadowing and stuff like that, and the colors, and I like to keep it all underneath. But I will show you how to do that in Adobe Reader. I assume that whenever we do PDF that your main default is Adobe Reader. Is everybody using that? Oh, nobody's using that. Who is using that? Okay, what is everybody else using? Okay, that's what I heard in my last session. But that is, you have to pay for that one, but it's a one-time fee, correct? Nobody knows. Okay. Somebody had said like you have to pay for it, and hopefully, if your company is willing to do that, then yes, let's do that. I need to look into it myself to see what that's all about because, this is nice, but if there's another program that will do it too, then yes. But I'm still going to show the Adobe Reader portion towards the end because if you do use that, it is a nice trick. And I don't know if it is faster than the Bluebeam stuff, but we'll see. And this is just more install. I'm going to move on. So here's just another layout. I have a 2D and elevations, and instead of rendering the iris pod, this is obviously a Steelcase product, so it doesn't render as nice as I would like. And I'm not going to waste too much time on trying to edit this product, so I just used a concept image. But it's nice, you have what it really is, and the client, I think, will appreciate some of that because sometimes renderings can get a little funky and unclear, and if you have the actual product in your presentation, that works. And then I show what's going to be in that pod. This is just another way. Scale and proportion. So like I've said, do not be afraid to use negative space and white space. Like keep it minimalistic. My presentation, even my PowerPoint, is pretty simple and clear, and there's not too much of a lot of things. So keep it simple. You want everything to be proportionate so it's easy to read and the client can look at it and visualize easily. I have a couple examples. Here is an example. I have a small typical and some rather large renderings. Proportionally, it's okay, but I would probably dial down the renderings a little bit to match the scale. You don't want it to be as small as that typical, but you know, to mimic the same type of white space that's all around this this presentation. But I think, you know, even having the scale typical, it's so simple that you don't really need anything too large, and the renderings are the main focus here. So I wanted the client to really understand what's in that typical, because you know, they can see a 2D, but they don't speak our language, so sometimes they're not going to really understand what all these boxes are for. So keeping, you know, a typical and a rendering on the same page is, you know, it's a nice complement to what you're trying to show. And then concept 3 is just another plan versus rendering view. I actually have a dot kind of show in an arrow showing where that view is coming from. Sometimes if you have a plan and you kind of just show a couple different renderings, they can't really understand where they're rendering from. And they always ask you, wait, where's that angle coming from? Wait, can you show me what's going on here? So there's probably a bunch of different ways you can create maybe a tagging, elevation type tagging view to kind of show where a rendering is being broken up into. But here's just another way. So if you follow this line, it's showing going down this way, and then the client can easily see, oh, okay, I get that. I can see these two tables here, and then again here. I cut this through, so if I didn't have an arrow here, he might be, or she might be confused as to where I'm really getting this viewpoint from. So I just have an arrow showing exactly. And then this is just some other stuff, pretty clear. So I'm going to move on. So design with the company in mind. Customization has been key lately. Every client wants their own stuff, and with specials and everything, you know, we've been really catering our products to what this client wants. But, you know, you can highlight some of their key features, some of the company's features. For this rendering that I'm showing, this was actually one of the Ralph Lauren bids that I worked on, and I want to show, oh, one of their iconic fabrics. So I have, you know, a bunch of their prints that I got from the website. I took from their a screenshot of their actual website to put on the screens to show, you know, I'm representing their company. You don't want to go too crazy with it. You don't need to put huge logos of everything, and you know, you want to really just, you know, have little details, because they do go a long way in presentations and in bids. And if they see that you're really in tune with what the client is and who they are, you know, it gives you an upper hand here. And I think what also is good is, you know, sometimes we get projects with, you know, companies we don't even know about, and if you go on their website and grab some of this stuff, it's nice to actually learn who the client is, and then you can probably aid your presentation a little better to, you know, who they are, and like, oh, I didn't know they were engineers, or I didn't know it was a design firm, and then you can kind of tweak things here and there. So it's nice to learn your client also. Also, with all these details, like I said before, just keep in mind, if I don't want the client to think everything's included in everything, so keep your disclaimers on if you need to disclaimer a rendering. I have hangers in here. If hangers aren't included, then say, hangers and accessories or whatever are not included. I don't want them to be caught up in those small details when they get their budget pricing. Okay, design your typicals to have, the accessories, and don't overdo the accessories. Sometimes you'll see bookcases and you just, they're filled and filled and filled with stuff. But like, if you go to the manufacturer's marketing pages, like their stuff, they have a couple books here and maybe a little trinket here, and like really use that stuff to your advantage to look into, because their marketing material is not going to show every single book they've ever used ever on their shelves. So keep it simple and keep the scale correct. If you have a trinket over here, then maybe you have your port here. Oops, sorry. But like, it's clear you have some books under here and maybe some potted plants. But it's simple and neat, and it's not too overbearing. Your client shouldn't get too stuck on that stuff. Also, understand if your client is going to get stuck on this stuff, don't include it. Because I just did a project where my company was like, put all those accessories, they look great or whatever, and I spent time on doing it, and then the client came back, can you remove everything from the typical? And I'm like, oh, no. But like, just know your client, so you don't get stuck doing all these extra stuff. So what I'm going to go into now, before I go into the actual CET portion of this presentation, is kind of just some typical product development to keep in mind. Some of the standards that we use, are simple and clean, and it's based around a typical. So I don't want to step on anybody's toes, A&D firms' toes, to create this whole room and then the client look at the wall color you chose and love it, and then it's not the intention of the A&D firm. So you have to be very careful with who you're working with, and if you are working closely with an A&D firm, ask them, like, do you mind if I build this room up, or do you have any details that I can incorporate in my drawing that that you're okay with, or send me even just your carpet sample and I'll include that in the rendering. Have that open communication with the A&D firm. And if not, keep it reflective floor. We usually do white reflective floor standard. And if you want to do a carpet, because maybe your typical is all white, and if you do all white rendering, it's not going to highlight very nicely, then do like, a gray stick scale type of carpet. You don't want to do anything that's too busy that, they're going to get distracted by it and be like, well, I didn't choose that red carpet. You just want to keep it simple and clean. And then the, wall details. Yes, there's a wall here, but you're not distracted by it. And, it may not be the exact room that it's going in, but you can't really tell by cropping out most of the wall. There's nothing there. And then you can, as you know, preset your settings to your flooring and stuff. So if there's something that you love to do over and over, just keep that as your preset. Like I've said, accessories. I actually stole this from a couple of years ago from the rendering breakout session to that break synthetic alignment and symmetries. Like I used to do all my renderings and my chairs had to be so straight and everything had to be so linear and just, that was the only way I could work. Now, if you kind of offset something or rotate something slightly, and even your chairs, it looks lived in and it looks more realistic to an actual, and what you're actually gonna sit in, and then the client is gonna understand. It's gonna be more relatable to like actual scenarios. So here's an example. I did recently a rendering for a Legoland company, And I went on the SketchUp warehouse. I'm like, oh my God, I need to put some Legos in here. And I found like this Lego airplane, and back here it's kind of hard to see. This Lego train. I'm like, I'm not going to do too many, but you know, I thought it was like just a nice, tasteful touch. The client sees that I understand what their product is, and you know, maybe it'll give us an upper hand, and they'll appreciate that I went a little above and beyond to stick some of that stuff in their renderings, along with the background of Legos. Like I said, the manufacturers are that you use, whether it's Hayworth, Herman Miller, Steelcase, go to their websites. They market their stuff beautifully, and you know, save some of that stuff that, you know, oh, I like this layout. I look at, sometimes I get so bored with some of my accessories that I want to see like what they do with them. So a group of 3 things is usually sometimes a go-to. I have something on the tack board, and you can see that in these renderings, it's just very, you know, it's minimalistic, it's simple, nothing's overly cluttered. And then I'm going to get into material mapping and some tips and tricks on frosted glass before I go into rendering. So I'm going to switch over to CET. So I'm going to work this typical and bump it up to the next level, but you're not gonna spend all day on one typical. This is not what I want to accomplish here. I want it to be a quick thing that you can utilize time and time again. And most of the stuff that you're gonna do, you're gonna be able to save as a favorite. So you do it once and then you're done with it. So here's my typical. What part of this typical is not working for you? Does anybody have any, like what would you change here? Okay, so I'll answer it. I know it's the end of the day, the last class of the conference, I get it. So the mapping on this panel, the wood here, it's, you know, it's copy and paste pretty much. It doesn't really show the graining as nice, so I'm going to want to change that. The work surface looks nice. That came in nice. For the seating, this is obviously Steelcase, but I'm sure this will work as long as the blocks are as edible as you know, throughout the manufacturers. But this mesh isn't showing, so I can't see through it, so I'm going to want to change that. Frosted glass, I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint and zoom in here. Sometimes CET frosted glass gets muddy. So I'm going to show how to edit that out, and so you don't have to get such a muddy type of glass. And also for you to be able to change the opacity of it, so you can kind of see a little through it better, so they kind of get it. I know sometimes in reality, frosted glass, you just can't see through it at all, but for purposes of kind of getting the point across that it is frosted and not just a white slab of glass, I'm going to be able to change the opacity of it. And then accessories. I'm going to want to kind of dress this typical up a little bit, so you know, it's fun, and you know, it's not just so, you know, stale, I guess, in a way. So I'm going to start off with, okay. Okay. So I'm going to start off with adding a monitor arm, which is, I'm sure everybody has added monitor arms. So I have saved mine as a favorite. And then I will just place it. It already looks 10 times better, I think. Does everybody know like how to put a monitor on your monitor arms, or do you want me to show how to do that? Are we good? We're good. Okay. But I have nothing on them, so I'm obviously going to gauge this to my client. So for this purpose, my client is CET. So I took a screenshot from the CET website and I saved it as a JPEG. And then what else? I have my session. So my client is this session, sure. Done. So now it kind of has, you know, it'll have your client on there. So that's always nice. For these panels, I don't necessarily want to edit the panel because then it becomes not smart and you can't change it, add electric, and it's never going to update how you need to. So if you change the fabric on the inside, if you edit it, and it won't change. So my little workaround is, and I'm sure there's probably a bunch of different ways to do it, is to use a wall. So I will use a thin wall and I will stretch it to the panel. With this wall, I'm going to obviously take away the base trim, and I'm going to obviously create the height. This is a 42-inch high panel. I'm not going to do a full 42. I'm going to do maybe a 41. You can see that a little bit is showing. Oops, sorry, lost my stuff here. But if you notice at the bottom, it's not elevating to the elevation of the actual typical. So I'm going to bump that up maybe 0.6. I mean, it's all trial and error sometimes, and you can also do control, you know, page up, or wait, shift and page up, shift and down, so you can get to that. Okay, that looks good. So then I'm going to pre-download. I already downloaded my material from the material website for Steelcase or whatever your manufacturer is, and I just put it into the regular material fan pack that you have, and I imported it, which I already did. If you are playing with horizontal versus vertical types of mapping for woods, it's good to copy that material, and in where you saved your materials, open it up and rotate it. So then you have a horizontal one and a vertical one. So that's what I have here. B is my horizontal one. I obviously didn't name it accordingly, which I would probably do in the future. So now I have my wall. One thing to keep in mind when you're editing your typical, you don't want to edit your whole floor plan. So if you have all these typicals here, you want to keep that just the standard typical. Because if you start putting all these accessories and, you know, editing the glass, you know, sometimes it doesn't become as smart as you would want it, but it's visually nice for your presentation. And if you shift something, you could probably make it a block and get away with it. You're going to just have too much stuff in that one space, and you don't need all that accessories and clutter on it. Maybe keeping your monitor arm on it is good, because then you kind of see that the client is getting one. But you don't need to use this typical to copy and paste it all over. So I'm going to go back to my wall tab, and I'm going to copy and paste my wall. So done. So now I have nice material mapping on the edge instead of that weird one that that is defaulted. For my work surface, it looks a little bland, so I'm going to want to add some accessories. Obviously, I think everybody uses SketchUp and has pre-loaded their favorite accessories and probably saved them as favorites. There is one that I like to use. It's this tackboard one that I've created. Does anybody want to see how to create the images so then you can edit them and put whatever you want on them? Has everybody been able to do that? Yeah? So sometimes I will, I keep this forever, so I can always change this and then gauge it to my client. I like to put maybe a calendar in it. Sometimes I've been known to put even my own images on it, maybe my wedding photo or something. Clients, if it's not geared towards the client and it's more for conceptual purposes, it's just fun to kind of put your own images on it. Sometimes, you know, I'll get a salesperson come back to me and say, "Did you really put your face on the monitor?" I'm like, "Yes, I did, and I hope you enjoyed it." but like I'll like tuck that stuff away. I'm not like gonna throw myself in all these renderings. So okay, so now I've created this block. I got this pin, obviously from SketchUp, and I created my interactive block. So I have it forever. So I want to place it as close to the panel as possible. So I'm just gonna push the arrow keys. And if I gone too far, then I'm just gonna go one up so I don't get any weird shadowing. I have some other favorites that I've created. I have round potted plant, which doesn't look like much here, but when it renders correctly. And then even if I downloaded something from, or I have something from the Office settings, like these books, I always change the colors of them. I can't stand having all these unrealistic, weird colored books, so I change them to something neutral. Or like a grayscale. Everybody likes the like ombre look, so I ombre my books a lot. So it could be just a couple different shades of gray, or green, or whatever the typical that you're working with kind of highlights. Just for more geometric cube, because that's kind of fun sometimes. But right here it kind of looks a little cluttered, so maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe I just want to include this magazine from CET on here, but I don't want CET on it. And so I'm going to change it. I downloaded Oprah from Google, so now I have Oprah on this magazine. Or if you're using, your client, and they have like a publication or a magazine, and you can kind of steal that image, put it on there. It's they may or may not notice it. Frosted glass. Has everybody figured out how to fix your frosted glass? Or should I go through that? Yes, I'll go through it then. So I actually need to revert these back. So, okay. So one girl in my last session actually said that what she does to fix her frosted glass might be even a quicker way than I do it. She says that she sets her her settings to custom quality, and she changes the error tolerance to, what did she say, 0.005. Has anybody done that? And that seems to fix the glitch. Render qualities. So I would like to test this out myself. So I'm going to change that. Error tolerance under custom qualities, under render quality, if you are in product lighting. So if you go to product lighting, scroll to render quality, customs, and then error tolerance 0.005. I haven't done this yet, so this will be a test. So what happened? My box that only selected this typical has gone away, so I'm going to go back in 2D and grab it again. Okay. I think that's a glitch. Okay. Yes, because it shouldn't have gone away, and it did. Yeah, I get that a lot. Other people get that too? Yeah. I don't think I heard anybody complain about it yet, though. So, oh, was it? Okay, good. Okay, good. Because I forgot about it until right now.
They were like, I don't think it's supposed to happen. Oh, but it is.
It does all the time. Okay, so if that works, then that's great. So I'm going to test that out. I'm going to turn that off. So I have my typical, and it's pretty good right now, so I am going to go through the render settings before I test out if the zero tolerance works. If not, then I'm going to show you my way of doing it. But before we render, I just want to go through my last two slides. Okay, so image perspective. Before we get into rendering, the best thing to understand is your perspective. You don't want your rendering of the typical to be from an unrealistic view from, sometimes it's important to get the whole thing in there, and if you have to do a weird view, like I get it, but more often than not, you want to keep it at a standing height type of position. Maybe not my standing height, but maybe like 5, 6 or something. That is probably the most realistic of standing next to a typical. So it looks more realistic. And never render a typical and cut anything off. You want to keep that whole typical without any weird cutoffs, because sometimes that can get confusing and it doesn't look like it was done right. Product lighting, I'm going to show quickly just the settings that I use. The settings I use are quick. Product lighting, I kind of fix the natural lighting a bit. I add a spotlight to kind of shoot some light into that typical. But like I've said before, like this is not supposed to take you hours to do. This is quick things that you can do with every rendering that you use and that you work with. Not every client deserves like a really nice rendering. Sometimes if they're too picky or whatever, you need to dial it down, yes. But it's, you should be able to kind of show off your rendering skills. Everybody likes to render, so why not do it all the time? And then I want to show a couple post-processing tricks that I like to use that I haven't really, I've never been really told to do it this way, but I like to. Yes?
Really quick, can you show and see once you get in there for the image perspective to have it at eye level? Is it the picture of the camera?
So basically what I do for eye level, I'm not going to go into the settings and like put actual eye level. I'm literally just going to eye it. Yes, I'm guesstimating that this, I think if we get too technical, that's where we lose a lot of time with I need this at 5'6" exactly. Like you're probably gonna tweak these settings too much, and then if you move out, you just ruined everything you did. So I think honestly, a lot of the stuff that I do, it's more of just like, it's trial and error. Like this doesn't look as nice as a typical rendering view, but if I just kind of push it down, now it looks like it's easier to understand, or I'm going to go above a little bit. Now, it's just like a tweaking of your mouse, but I think it's going to take a lot less time to do than to try and set every preset to everything. That's just how I work. If you work differently, then definitely do what you keep doing if it works for you. So what was I going to do? Okay, light settings. So before I go back into this typical, I'm going to set my my quick spotlight. I used to do the orb, and I used to just place it underneath the surface to kind of light up the bottom, but I find that sometimes that gets spotty and then it reflects the seating a little weird. So I've been adopting this the spotlight, which you will find in the photo lab. Not the photo lab, this tab, the 3D tab. I used to not use it because I think back then when I was using it, it would show up in a rendering, but you can turn that setting off now, which I don't know if you could have always done, but I now have been able to do it. So I'm gonna just pull this out a little bit. I don't want it too close because I don't want it to light up the typical as much, and I kind of don't want it to be as pitched up because I don't want to get any weird shadows, so I'm going to kind of keep it level with the typical. And then I'm going to change my settings a little bit. So I find sometimes if the brightness is up too much, it's really just a super bright rendering. And you can do post-processing to get it down, but I'm not going to, I'd rather use post-processing to bump up the lighting, if anything. So I usually put it down to 100 or close to 100, and then I bump up the effect range, which is where the spotlight is shining. So it's not just here. If you bump that up to 40, it's going to be more, it's going to cover more area, I guess, in a way.
Effect range?
Yes. I don't really play with any of the other settings. The more you play with, the longer it's going to take you to do some of the stuff. So I realized that my 2D box is not capturing that. I'm not sure if it would, so I'm just going to fix it here. I'm going to go up to my, I'm going to go back. Sometimes I want to do it clean, so I want it all reset. So I'm going to try the 0 tolerance. I'm going to bump this up. The anti-alias, so the lines of the rendering isn't jagged. And then I'm going to bump up the tolerance to test that theory out from last session to 005 to not get frosted, to not get that muddy frosted glass. I'm just going to edit this a little bit to see it. And then we're going to scroll down, and I'm going to use some lighting and shadows. This is an extra step. You don't have to do it, but it doesn't take all that much longer to do. I usually bump this down to about like 15, and then I just align the sunlight and the camera, and it's just gonna, I feel like it's super sensitive that if you bump it up too much, it's just gonna create a big bright blob, and I really don't want that. And then I'm going to change the direction of the shadows. So you can see it's shifting as I move this cursor along. This is not even facing it. Obviously this light is going this way. I kind of want it to go the opposite way, like this. And maybe I want to pitch it back a little bit. You don't want the shadows to reflect crazy against, your panels. Like I don't want my chair to kind of reflect too crazy into the workstation. I think before I render, I forgot to edit my chair mesh. That bothers me, that it's not see-through. So I'm going to look at this chair. I know it's steel case, but I'm sure if you can get the same stuff from all the manufacturers. So I know that my finish is 5090 for the wasabi finish. And I'm going to go into my, I'm going to edit it first before I go into my materials. And so I'm editing it, and then I'm going to select the single mesh. Sometimes I have to click out, and then I'm going to detach it. Sometimes I will accidentally just color my whole product in. I'm like, oh. So I like to just detach it for the time being. I go into my material. I had already typed it in, and you click it, and it's still the same mesh. So now I want to edit this. I'm going to double click into that mesh, and then I'm going to just scroll down and change the opacity. And you can see it change kind of right before your eyes. And this just looks good. I'm not going to set it to a certain point. I think this is visually just okay. I'm going to click out. It's done. Yeah, I can favorite it, and then I can reuse this one forever. Or you can even create standards for your design team and do all the meshes or something if you want. I think it's just easier just on case by case. And then I'm going to want to just unite everything back together. So it's still the same. Of course, once you do this, if you change your materials in schemes or anything, it's not going to change. So that's why it's good to keep this here. And everything else in your populated plan is still editable, and you can still change the schemes. So now I could copy and paste this all around my typical. So now I don't have to do it 4 times. You can make a block out of it. I'm just going to do 2. You can make a block out of it, save it. So now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to render this. So this shouldn't take long. Hopefully the glass isn't muddy. If you wanted to get more of that ghosting effect, you might want to select the glass to ghost, so then you can change the opacity of it. So then you can see a little through it. Sometimes that doesn't come across easily. Let's see if this works. And then I want to show a little bit of the just working in the paper space. So I have one here where I've created all my kind of tags and labels. This is pretty much just standard lines and boxes that I've drawn and that I've put finishes on. So this might be a good thing to have for phasing. So if you're going to phase your drawing, use this color as it, or whatever color you select. I have my elevation, and I already rendered. This was the one I had done previously, just to show. Does anybody want me to show how to put this layout together, or you guys are pretty good at already doing that? And then I have an example of showing the finishes. It's nice, obviously, to put your finishes in using the image, obviously, and then putting all your finishes and showing where they're going. This is messy, so this isn't going to be appealing. So this, I mean, it's not ideal because where I have them located that I'm having all these jagged lines, but it is a lot cleaner to do. And then I have my phasing that I'm going to show you a little bit in Adobe Reader, how just the quick version of doing it that way. This is how I did it in Configura, but I'm not a huge fan of seeing all that white in there, so I like to just take it out of the program, but I think they're going to fix it, so we won't have to do that much longer. I think the rendering is, but like, how quick was that? That was maybe a minute or two of rendering, and you know, it's going to be a nice rendering, and you know, you didn't spend a year on it. So it'll be very quick and easy.
How do you get the arrows?
Oh, the arrows. Sorry, yes. So I go to the custom tools, and then I have this arrow. It comes in black, so I always like to change it. Black is such a harsh color sometimes, so I always like to change it to like maybe a dark gray, and it's a little easier on the eyes, I think. And then that's how you place them in. And then, you know, you want to label your materials so your client understands which material that is selected and where it's going. I think we should be done with the rendering. So I just have a couple post-processing tips once it's complete. Any minute. 5 minutes? Got it. Oh, is it done? I don't know. It never finished. Interesting. Okay, sometimes that happens. I'm gonna cancel it and re-render, and I'm gonna show you the Adobe trick in the middle. Hopefully it'll all happen at the same time and be done. So this is Adobe Reader. Is everybody familiar with this page? You might have a more advanced version. This I think is just an older one. So basically I'm gonna go into comment and you have some basic tools, and I am going to use this draw rectangle, and right now it's already set up to be blue and opaque. So I'm going to change that to the phase 1. I think this is similar. You can custom, obviously, use the color. I think maybe this was it. But I'm just going to use the standard for now. Let me not block it. And then you can change the opacity of this. And then that's really how I phase, and then I put the blocks wherever. So you may have a question of, what if you change your layout and you have to re-PDF everything? If you've saved this previously as a PDF, you can import your file, and you can, let me delete this. So I have done this already. So you import your data file, you go down to the right-hand corner and select all files, and this was, say, the first rendition I did, and you click with facing, it's going to bring all that stuff in for you. So you never have to redo it. So if you updated your plan, now you're good to go. So, and I just think this is a lot neater. Everything's, you know, behind the color, and it's just simple. But that's actually, was that clear or good? Okay, so go down, you see how you have your layers. There's options on the right-hand side, this little tool here. And then there's import data file. And then it's going to prompt you to find that drawing. So you obviously go to wherever your drawing is, but then you have to go down to all files supported. So then you see everything, and then you click the oldest one that you did. Yes. Oh yes, you can do whatever you need if you need to.
So it brings in everything that you drew in PDF, but it takes the newest plan that you generated.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you've done it a bunch of times, make sure you are clicking your most up-to-date file that you use for it, because it'll be the most up-to-date one. That's just my workaround for it. Simple and easy. I don't know, was that easier than the Bluebeam type, or is it the same thing? Same thing? Okay. So that kind of helps. Because if you already have Adobe, you don't have to try and get the Bluebeam. So that's just another way. Let's just see this rendering. 94%. Hopefully we can get there. I don't know what time this ends. If you have to go, I understand. Sometimes it's like watching paint dry. Does anybody have any questions in the meantime? Are we good? Was it helpful? Sorry I had to re-render that. Okay, I'm sure post-processing everybody gets. I don't know, it's not rendering everything. So I'm just gonna reset my thing, except my ghost. This was from the previous class. I don't know, it's stuck on. So basically, if you bump up the brightness, but my little trick is everybody has said to bump up the contrast. Instead, I like to bring that down, and you kind of get more of that detailing in your rendering back. But say you want that, you know, vibrancy, you just bump the saturation back up, and you'll get more of that vibrancy back. Oh, here it is. This is the updated typical. So it kind of did show in still with the error tolerance. Yeah, so basically what I do is I edit the glass and I just paint it a white paint with a reflection from the material, the regular material area, and then I ghost it.
It still keeps the smart symbol?
No, you have to edit it.
Oh.
Yeah, you're gonna have to edit it and paint it with the white reflective, and then ghost it, and then it won't show muddiness. But this was a trial.
Ghosting it and it's like built as a panel attached screen, wouldn't that ghost the top cap then too?
You're gonna ghost the top cap a little bit, but you're never going to put that ghost down that much for frosted glass, so you're never gonna see that ghosted as well. So you should be okay with it. Okay, thank you everybody. Sorry it went over.